My name is Evelyn Grace. I'm 32 years old, the youngest in a family that never asked who I wanted to be, only told me what I was expected to do. My father, Frank Grace, built our business from a small garage into a regional chain. He believed in hard work, clean floors, and quiet obedience. My brother Jason was his favorite. Loud, charming, careless, but adored. And me, I was the steady one. The numbers, the reports, the late nights, the one who kept the lights on, but never the one invited to the table. I thought loyalty would earn me a seat. It didn't. Then one Thursday evening at 7:42 p.m., I got the message. No greeting, no explanation. Just my father's voice. Don't come to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. Have you ever had someone end a lifelong bond like it was a canceled appointment? 18 words. That's all it took, and I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I replied with 2 words. Understood. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the backbone they never thanked, this story is for you. Stay. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's where power begins. I didn't call him back. Not that night. Not ever. I didn't forward the message to my mother. She wouldn't have done anything. She never did not when it became inconvenient. Instead, I sat in my kitchen. Just me. The silence and a voicemail that still played in my mind. Not louder, just clearer. I opened my laptop, logged into the loan portal I hadn't touched in months, and did something none of them expected. I removed my name, not out of spite, not to hurt them, but because for the first time I knew exactly what I was doing. 2 years ago, when Grace Motors needed an expansion loan, $2.5 million, they couldn't qualify a loan. Jason was drowning in credit card debt. My father had too many personal liabilities. They needed someone clean, someone dependable, so they came to me. No apology, no gratitude, just a pen, already uncapped, and I signed. Because back then, I still believed that being useful meant I belonged. But now at 62, I've learned something else. When someone only calls you when they need you, it's not love. It's convenience. And that night, when I clicked to remove cosigner, I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. Like exhaling after holding your breath for far too long. My father always said, we don't hire outsiders. We raise replacements. He said it in front of employees, in front of Jason, in front of me. As if we were pieces in a system, not people. Jason was 3 years older, louder, looser. He broke things and they laughed. I fixed them and they nodded. Once. By 12, I was logging tire shipments into QuickBooks. By 16, I was managing payroll during spring break. Not because I asked, because I was told, no thank yous, no smiles, just the expectation, be available, be quiet, be tireless. My mother, Margaret, wasn't unkind. She just disappeared into her role. Dinner hostess, invoice stuffer, peacemaker. After every meeting, she'd pull me aside, touch my arm, whisper, your father's building something for us. Be grateful, sweetheart. So I was, or I tried to be. I studied hard, earned my MBA, turned down a corporate job in Chicago. Frank said, family before ambition. And I believed him. Jason. He was focused on vision, whatever that meant. I handled everything else. The leases, the banks, the paperwork no one wanted to touch, and I told myself it mattered, that my sacrifice would be seen. But the truth is, they never saw me, only the things I could carry. When the opportunity came to open a new headquarters, I negotiated the lease. Compared 6 banks, locked in a 3-year interest rate. But the bank needed 2 names. One signature wasn't enough. Jason's credit was ruined. Frank didn't want to risk his assets, so they turned to me. No meeting, no dinner, just a folder on the table. A pen already uncapped. I hesitated maybe half a second, then I signed, because I still believed that loyalty could buy belonging, that if I gave more, they'd finally give back. They didn't. They never even said thank you. They moved on as if it was always going to be me. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've kept the business stable, balanced the budgets, fixed things behind the scenes, quietly, faithfully, and I told myself it meant something, that they needed me. But lately, something had changed. Fewer emails, fewer calls, less access. And then one day, Jason laughed in a meeting, dismissed a $12,000 error as a favor to a friend. I looked at Frank, expecting him to say something. Anything. He didn't. He sipped his coffee and said, "Focus on bigger things, Evelyn. Stop acting like an outsider." And just like that, I realized I had been one all along. That word outsider, it didn't sting like insult, it settled. Somewhere deep beneath the skin, like a label I'd always worn but never read aloud. I wasn't a new hire. I had overseen 4 site expansions, renegotiated our fleet lease, kept payroll balanced through 2 supply chain collapses. But when I questioned anything beyond spreadsheets, I became a threat. After that meeting, the shift was slow, almost polite. My login stopped working. Vendor access disappeared. Financial dashboards showed only partial views. The company card tied to my name expired. No one replaced it. Each time I asked, the answers were soft. Temporary system update. We're restructuring. Don't worry about it. But Jason got a standing desk. A company-paid Vegas trip. An office chair that cost more than my first car. And I started to see it. Not just the favoritism, but the fade out. They weren't firing me. They were phasing me out, quietly enough that even I might not notice. But I did. And something inside me changed. Not anger, not yet. Just a stillness. A quiet kind of alert. The kind that whispers they're opening a door, and it only swings one way, so I began saving things. Spreadsheets, emails, invoices, notes. I labeled the folder Shadow Ledger. I wasn't sure what I was building, only that I needed to hold on to the truth. At night, I organized the files, cross-checked reports, saved versions they thought I couldn't see. Jason had started copying clients on emails but signing with my name. It wasn't sloppy. It was calculated. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I reached out to someone I trusted, Susan Adler, a law school classmate I hadn't spoken to in years. She once helped her sister escape a business divorce. She knew how things worked behind the curtain. We met for coffee, neutral ground. No emotions, just questions. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to ask one thing: if a co-signer withdraws from a business loan, what happens? She paused, folded her hands, then said the words that cracked something open. Depends. If you're not a guarantor and you weren't involved in misuse, you can withdraw. Quietly, legally. I exhaled. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. I didn't know if I was planning an exit or building an alibi. But I knew the story I'd told myself about being the loyal daughter, the one keeping the ship afloat, wasn't real anymore. They weren't just pushing me out. They were doing it slow enough to keep cashing in on my silence, and I wasn't going to let that be the ending. It was a Thursday morning in early spring. Outside my office window, the trees were just starting to bud. I remember that detail because what I found that day felt anything but new. I'd received my monthly credit summary. Out of habit, not worry. But one line caught my eye: Lane Holdings, deferred payment review. That name hadn't appeared in years. A shell company Frank once used for real estate. Curious, I looked deeper, and what I found wasn't surprising. It was worse. The loan I had co-signed, the $2.5 million for the new headquarters, was 3 payments behind, past due, leaning on grace periods and delayed invoices. My name was still on the loan, and it was being used in communication with creditors. They were leveraging my clean credit, my stable finances, to buy more time. But I hadn't seen a financial report in months. I hadn't been invited to a board meeting since last fall. The last time I asked Jason for an update, he sent a winking emoji. No worries, sis. Big vision coming. Vision doesn't pay bills. I opened old files, traced 6 quarters of invoices, compared real numbers against the projections I had written myself. Then I saw it $40,000 in consulting fees, all funneled through Jason's friend. And that was just the beginning. Some entries were labeled marketing tests, and I had no campaigns, no reports, no data. Fleet repairs were triple billed. Vendor quotes carried my initials, ones I never approved. This wasn't mismanagement. It was orchestration, designed to look invisible, until it wasn't. That same day, I met Susan again. Same booth, same courthouse cafe, quiet like before. I brought everything: invoices, screenshots, memos, a full picture. She flipped through the papers slowly, eyes steady, jaw still. When she reached the loan file, she stopped, tapped the page gently. "You're not listed as a guarantor," she said. I blinked. "Meaning what?" "Meaning, they used your name to secure it, but legally you're not bound. Withdraw now before restructuring and you're free. I stared at her. Let that sentence settle in my bones. She leaned in, voice calm. You don't need to warn them. You don't need to explain. Just move the brick holding up their wall and let it fall. I nodded, didn't speak, just felt the room breathe. That night, I renamed the folder. It was no longer Shadow Ledger. It was Redemption Plan. I opened the draft letter Susan had helped me write. I had read it many times before, but this time I didn't hesitate. It took 4 minutes. That's how long the portal stayed open once I logged in using the admin credentials I created 2 years ago, back when they still trusted me, back when I still believed I was part of it. The screen flickered once, then showed the line Co-applicant status active. Modification options available. I clicked remove. Then I uploaded the withdrawal letter, signed, dated, final. I typed in my PIN, submitted. No alarms, no flashing warnings, just a quiet message at the bottom of the screen. Update received. Pending compliance review. It was done. Next came risk control. I emailed the bank's loan officer, Keith Turner. He'd worked with us during the expansion. I attached a full summary, unapproved spending, altered records, restricted access, signatures used without consent. The tone was clear, professional, calm. I didn't add emotion. I didn't need to. Within the hour, the bank froze the operating account tied to Lane Holdings. No alert to Jason. No message to Frank. Just a pause. A blinking cursor where trust used to live. While they scrambled, I moved. I contacted Linda Moore, my personal accountant. Someone I trusted. Someone thorough. We reviewed every account, every possible risk. Her verdict, no liability, no damage, no legal obligation to inform them, just silence, and finally protection. That night, I turned my phone to silent and meant it. No waiting for calls, no checking for messages, no weight in my chest. For the first time in years, I slept. When morning came, there were already 32 missed calls. By late afternoon, 78. 12 from my mother, 13 from Frank, 7 from Jason, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I played the voicemail. It was Robert Fields, the company's longtime accountant. His voice trembled, strained. Evelyn, call me. Now, this is serious. The loan's collapsing. The bank pulled support. We're at risk of default. You need to fix this. Do you hear me? You have to fix this. I listened twice. Not because I didn't understand, but because it sounded like justice. And justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't shout. It echoes. By early evening, Jason sent his first text. What the hell did you do? Then another, you're overreacting. We could have handled this internally. But that word, we didn't land anymore. There hadn't been a we in a very long time. That night, my mother left a voicemail. No anger, only a tremble. Sweetheart, what's happening? Your father says the bank froze everything. Did you sign something? I called her back, let it ring twice, then said softly, I removed my name, that's all. There was a pause on the line, not long, just enough. Then her voice small and breaking, you can't just do that, actually, I said. I can. And I did. She went quiet, longer this time. Then came the familiar line, the one she always used when control slipped from Frank's hands. Evelyn, this affects all of us. I breathed in. Calm, clear. No, I said. You made sure it didn't. And I ended the call. Not in anger, in completion. They picked the restaurant, the one we used to visit for birthdays. Old brick walls, too many ceiling fans, a private room by the fireplace. I arrived 15 minutes late, on purpose. Frank and Margaret sat stiff, Jason scrolling his phone, pretending it didn't matter. One empty chair waited for me as if I could still be summoned. Jason stood when I entered. Thanks for coming. I didn't come for you, I said, pulling the chair back slowly. Let's not waste each other's time. Frank leaned forward. Eyes locked on mine. You made your point, loud and clear. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't lean back. No, I said. The bank made the point. I just stopped protecting your lie. Frank's jaw tightened. Margaret shifted in her seat, hands folded too neatly. She still wore pearls like it was a holiday dinner. We're trying to hold this together, he said. You think you're punishing us, Evelyn, but you're punishing the legacy your grandfather built. I held his gaze. Steady, unblinking. Grandpa built a garage, I said. You turned it into a dictatorship. Jason scoffed, sat back. Come on, we gave you everything. No, I said quietly. You gave me a job, not a voice. The silence that followed was thick, not awkward, just final. Then slowly I reached into my bag, pulled out a sealed envelope, placed it on the table, unshaken. This is a signed affidavit, I said. It confirms I've permanently withdrawn from the loan, the board, and all business operations. Frank opened his mouth. I raised my hand. I'm not finished. I took a breath. Even. Complete. I'm also submitting an anonymous report to the state auditor. There are funds missing, vendors unpaid, payroll irregularities. I pushed the envelope toward them. It's your mess now. Fully. Legally. Jason's face turned red. His mouth moved, but no words came yet. And for the first time, they saw what I had become. Not angry, just untethered. Jason finally spoke, his voice sharp, almost shaking. You're destroying us. Over ego, I stood up slowly. Calm, deliberate. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just removing the illusion that I was ever part of it. Behind me, Margaret let out a quiet breath. Frank didn't move. Then from across the room, a word I had never heard from him. Not once. Evelyn, please. It was barely above a whisper, but it landed like thunder. I didn't turn around, didn't give it weight. You left me a message, I said, my voice low but clear. You told me we were done. I'm just agreeing with you formally. And I walked out. No tears, no turning back, no final look. The air outside felt colder than I remembered, but cleaner. Later that week, a quiet article appeared in a small business journal. Grace Motors faces financial instability amid internal disputes. I didn't leak it, but I knew who did. 2 days later, Susan called me. Her voice, half amused, half proud. When people lose power, she said they always look for someone to blame. She paused. They just didn't expect that person to have already walked away. The voicemails came again, but they were different now, sharper, panicked, cracked at the edges. From Frank, you ungrateful child. We built that business for you. You're ruining your own future. From Jason, you think you're clever. You'll need us one day. From Robert the accountant. Do you even understand what this means? You've destroyed their legacy, but none of them said what they feared the most, that they destroyed it first. Long before I walked away, they used my name but never gave me a seat. They took my silence but never offered respect. They saw me as reliable, useful, invisible. Now the loan was unraveling, the accounts frozen, vendors pulling out, employees whispering, and me untouched. No legal blowback, no financial damage. My credit still clean, my future mine again. I forwarded the last voicemail to Susan, then deleted the rest. The next day, I turned my phone off, silent. And for the first time in over a decade, it stayed that way. No alarms, no crises, no fires waiting for me to put out. Just quiet. Not the kind that hides things. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that holds. The kind that finally lets you breathe. I moved into a small loft in downtown Portland. Nothing fancy. White walls, tall windows, sunlight I didn't have to earn. It was the first place I'd ever chosen for myself, not based on someone else's needs, not measured by convenience, just mine. There was enough room for a desk and peace. I didn't redecorate much, just added plants, a candle by the window, a soft chair where I could sit without waiting for someone to ask something. I started consulting quietly for women-led startups who were building from scratch without shortcuts, without someone else's name on the door. Not because I needed purpose. I already had it. It came slowly, but it came letters, referrals, thank you notes from women who saw themselves in my story. They didn't know the full version. They didn't need to. They just knew what it feels like to carry too much for too long and to finally set it down. 3 months later, an envelope arrived. Plain, no return address. Just a bank logo and a tracking code. Inside was one page. Clean, direct. This letter confirms the commercial loan associated with Evelyn Grace has been formally withdrawn and restructured. No further obligation remains, no action required, no apology, no thanks, just the truth. And that was enough. I placed the letter in a folder, the one labeled complete, simple, final. Then I slid it into the back of the cabinet. No ceremony, no second glance. That night, I lit a candle by the window. The city below hummed soft alive, but far away from the noise I used to know. I poured a glass of wine, dark red, still. For a long time, I just sat there, breathing, not thinking, letting the stillness mean something else now. Not emptiness, not defeat, but space, room to exist without proving anything to anyone. I thought of that voicemail, the one that started it all. Don't come to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. They wanted silence, obedience, absence, and they got it. What they didn't expect was that I would thrive inside that silence, that I would build something not out of revenge, but out of truth. I opened a new client file, typed one line at the top, "You're not difficult, you're just finally visible." Then I saved it, closed the tab, and leaned back in the chair. No tension in my shoulders, no phone buzzing beside me, just the quiet kind of ending that doesn't need applause, only air, only peace. Frank used to say, "We protect what we build." He repeated it like gospel in meetings over dinner, like it explained everything. But what he really meant was, we protect what's ours to control. He protected Jason, even from himself, even when the numbers didn't add up, even when I brought proof to the table. He never protected me, not from the stress, not from the pressure, not from being used as a signature on someone else's mistakes. I protected them for years, through late nights, missed birthdays, holidays spent staring at spreadsheets instead of candles. Because I believed I was part of it. That my place would be honored if I worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, stayed quiet enough. But what they wanted wasn't family, it was function. And when I stopped functioning on their terms, I became disposable. That's the thing about loyalty. If it's only expected and never returned, it turns into self-betrayal. I didn't leave the business out of anger. I left because I realized I wasn't protecting a legacy. I was covering up a lie. Now standing on the other side of it all, I can finally say there is no peace in being needed for the wrong reasons, only exhaustion. And one day, if you're lucky, clarity. In the months after I walked away, something strange happened. Nothing. No lawsuits, no letters, no one knocked at my door. They didn't want to escalate because they knew what I held. Every invoice, every manipulated report, every shadow they assumed would stay hidden. And I had no interest in revenge. Just the truth, documented and safe. I stopped checking their headlines, stopped opening emails with subject lines like, "Can we talk?" I already had. They just hadn't listened. One afternoon, I passed by one of the original Grace Motors garages. Paint fading, sign a little crooked. It used to feel like legacy. Now it just looked tired, uncared for, like something built on the wrong foundation. I stood across the street for a while. Didn't cry, didn't smile, just watched. Let the weight of everything settle, not as burden, but as distance. I never wanted to ruin what they built. I just refused to keep holding it up alone. People think silence is weakness, that walking away is giving up. But sometimes leaving is the most powerful sentence you'll ever complete. And once you say it, once you step fully out of the shadows, you realize you were never the problem. You were just too quiet for too long. When I left, I didn't take much. A few notebooks, old client files, the ledger I had once built out of fear and instinct. But the most important thing I took was my name. For so long, it had been a tool used when convenient, forgotten, when uncomfortable. They signed it to loans, attached it to trust they didn't earn, carried it like insurance when the waters got deep, but they never asked what it cost me to carry them. Now my name belongs to me again. No hidden debts, no quiet obligations, no unspoken roles to shrink inside. I didn't celebrate, didn't post, didn't announce anything. Peace doesn't need an audience, and healing doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like mornings that start without dread, evenings that end without fixing someone else's fire. I started keeping a journal again, not to track tasks, but to remember who I am when no one's expectations fill the room. Some pages are blank, some are messy, but every word is mine. People ask what I regret. I don't. Not the work, not the years, not even the silence, because all of it brought me here to a life that's mine, fully, and for the first time in decades, that's more than enough. My loft isn't big, but there's space now where there never used to be. A place for my thoughts to land, for my breath to come easy, for quiet to feel safe, not like punishment, but like freedom. There's a corner by the window where sunlight spills across the floor. Some days I sit there for hours. No phone, no lists, no one asking anything of me. I light a candle. Sometimes I don't even notice when it burns all the way down. This is the room I never had before. Not in the house I grew up in. Not in the office they kept me just close enough to use, but never close enough to trust. Now it's mine. No name on the door, no title, no legacy hanging over it. Just breath and the soft sound of life without demands. Clients come and go, stories shared, advice given. But no more carrying what isn't mine. No more being the safety net for people who never once looked down to see if I was breaking. The quiet still comes, but now it's not heavy. It's not silence to survive in, it's silence I chose. And choosing, that's what makes the difference. Because for once, the room I'm in fits who I am, not who they told me to be. People talk about loyalty like it's a virtue you never question. Like staying is always better than walking away. But loyalty without respect, without voice, without return isn't noble. It's erasure. I stayed for decades, held things together behind the scenes, carried weight they never acknowledged, kept the wheels moving so they could keep pretending they were driving. I excused it all, the oversight, the silence, the way they only called when something broke. I thought it was love. That duty was how we proved it. But loyalty given blindly becomes a cage. A quiet one, built out of habits you never thought to question. Frank never asked if I wanted to lead. Jason never thought I needed credit. Margaret always told me to be grateful. I was, for a while. Until I realized gratitude without agency is submission. I don't regret being loyal, but I do regret believing that loyalty would earn me what they never intended to give. Respect, recognition. A place that was truly mine. Now I don't measure love by how long someone stays. I measure it by whether they see me when I'm standing still, not just when I'm saving them. And by that measure, I was alone in that family for a very long time. I used to think being quiet was a kind of strength, that if I didn't make noise, if I didn't need too much, I'd be easier to keep. I learned how to disappear in plain sight. At meetings, I took notes. At home, I cleaned up after the damage. At work, I spoke only when asked, and even then carefully. Jason stormed rooms. Frank filled them. Margaret softened the edges. And me, I held it all together so they wouldn't have to notice what was already cracking. They didn't see you as me. They saw results, budgets balanced, deals closed, problems solved, and that was enough for them. But silence is a tricky thing. It can feel like peace until you realize it's just the space where your voice was never welcome. They mistook my quiet for acceptance, my compliance for comfort. But I wasn't comfortable. I was disappearing. Every time I let something slide, an unfair comment, a missed thank you, a backroom decision without me, I lost a little more of myself. Until one day there was barely anything left but function. And that's when I knew being the quiet one only works if someone's actually listening. They weren't. So I stopped whispering and started leaving. They always thought leaving meant slamming doors, shouting, a scene. But that's not how I left. I didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't try to make them understand. I just stopped showing up to the version of me they depended on, the one who fixed things, smoothed things over, covered the cracks with silence and spreadsheets. Leaving isn't always loud. Sometimes it's logging out without saying goodbye. Sometimes it's an email with no emotion, just facts. Sometimes it's watching everything you held together start to fall apart and choosing not to save it. They thought I was the support beam, the steady hand, the backup plan. But I wasn't. I was the exit they never thought I'd take. And once I took it, they realized what I had really been: not weak, not replaceable, but essential. They just never said it until it was too late. That's the thing about quiet people. We don't leave often. But when we do, we take everything they never bothered to protect. And what's left behind isn't just silence, it's absence that echoes. Not for drama, not for revenge, but because staying would have meant disappearing completely. And I was done fading out for people who never once asked me to stay. After I left, they kept reaching out. Calls, emails, one-liners disguised as apologies. We should have talked first. You misunderstood. Let's fix this. But none of it was about me. It was about control, about stopping the consequences from touching them. They didn't ask how I was, didn't acknowledge the years I gave. They just wanted the fallout to be manageable. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because silence was finally mine to use. I used to respond to everything. Clarify, soften, make sure no one felt too uncomfortable. But comfort had cost me too much. Now I let the messages pile up, unread, unneeded. Freedom isn't always a beginning. Sometimes it's just the end of needing to explain yourself. They thought I'd feel guilt, that I'd circle back, that I'd remember birthdays and holidays and come home. But I remembered something else every time I asked for space and was told to be stronger. Every time I raised a concern and was told to be grateful. Now I don't explain. I don't defend. I don't apologize for stepping out of a story that was never written with me in mind. And in that silence, I found something they never gave me. Permission to exist as I am. They always believed power was in who spoke the loudest, who made the rules, who signed the front of the check. But they never understood the kind of power that grows in silence. The kind you build when no one's looking, when no one thinks you're watching. I had watched for years. I knew where the money went, which vendors were real, which ones were favors. I knew what Jason signed under my name, what Frank approved without blinking, and I kept records. Not out of fear, but because instinct told me one day I'd need them. That day came, and I was ready. Not loud, not shaken, just steady. They called it betrayal. I called it truth. They called it destruction. I called it release. I didn't take their company down. They did that when they built it on entitlement instead of respect. When they used my labor without acknowledgement, my credit without consent. All I did was remove myself from the foundation they assumed I'd hold forever. And when that piece came loose, so did everything they thought was secure. Because real power isn't what you take. It's what you refuse to carry any longer. And I was finally done carrying all of them. After the accounts froze, they scrambled. Vendors backed out. Staff whispered in hallways. Payroll ran late. The phones rang, but no one had answers. They tried to keep the facade. Meetings, statements, big words like restructure, temporary, liquidity, vision realignment. But beneath all that spin was panic. Jason tried to blame the bank. Frank tried to blame me. Margaret tried to stay quiet, as usual. But none of them could change the one thing that mattered now. My name was gone. They could no longer use it to delay payments, to reassure creditors, to hold up the lie that I was still inside the walls cleaning up their mess. I wasn't. And every day that passed, they had to face that. They built the company on borrowed trust mine. And once it was gone, so was the illusion that they were untouchable. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate, didn't follow the headlines as the business began to fold. I simply kept living. One quiet morning at a time, letting the distance grow between the woman I was overworked, unseen, essential but dismissed, and the woman I was becoming. They called it collapse. I called it release. And it was finally theirs to manage, theirs to explain, theirs to answer for. I had already done more than enough. They always thought they knew me, Evelyn, the reliable one, the quiet shadow, the safety net, the one who stayed late, never raised her voice, signed what needed signing, and kept things moving without being asked. But that wasn't who I was. That was who they needed me to be. So I became it until I couldn't anymore. What they never understood was that I wasn't born to serve. I was trained to, shaped by repetition, softened by silence, and eventually lost in it. For years I thought strength meant endurance, that surviving in their world meant I belonged in it. But now I know belonging doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from being seen without shrinking. They never saw me. Not really. Not when I renegotiated the lease. Not when I saved them thousands. Not when I held the whole operation together while they smiled for the press. They saw results. They didn't see the person behind them. But I see her now. The version of me that doesn't wait to be invited, doesn't need permission, doesn't confuse silence with love. She's steady, but not small. She's still, but not absent. And finally, she belongs to herself, not to a company, not to a last name, not to a legacy that never had room for her. For so long, my name was just a line on a form, a signature at the bottom, a placeholder for trust they didn't earn. Evelyn Grace, it sounded strong, but I carried it like a burden, not a choice. They used it to get loans, to calm bankers, to prove stability they hadn't built themselves, and I let them, because I thought it meant I mattered, that being needed was the same as being valued. But it wasn't. It took me years to understand the difference. Now when I write my name, it doesn't come with weight. It comes with clarity. I'm not a backup plan, Not the fine print, not the silent asset. I'm the author of what stays, of what ends. That one act removing my name wasn't revenge, it was return to myself. A quiet undoing of years spent tying my worth to a family that measured me by usefulness. Now I sign things with intention. Contracts I believe in, clients I choose, not out of obligation but alignment. There's a difference between being used and being trusted. They never trusted me. They just expected I'd stay. But my name is no longer theirs to carry. It's mine. And that more than anything is freedom. They love the word legacy. Frank used it like a shield. Jason wore it like a crown. Margaret whispered it as if it were sacred. This is your inheritance, they used to say. One day it will all be yours. But what they called legacy was just expectation wrapped in guilt. Endless work, no voice. Responsibility, but no recognition. I didn't inherit a legacy. I inherited a weight. And for years, I carried it because I thought that's what loyalty meant. But true legacy isn't built on silence and sacrifice. It's built on integrity, on mutual respect, on truth. What they wanted was obedience. What they offered was control. But I gave them more than they deserved: years of labor, a spotless name, unquestioned devotion, all without ever being asked what I wanted in return. When I walked away, they called it betrayal. But if protecting myself means betraying a system that never valued me, then I'm proud of it. The legacy they held so tightly was already hollow. All I did was stop pretending it wasn't. Now when I think of legacy, I don't picture buildings or bank accounts. I picture peace, a name untouched, a life I built from the ashes of everything they tried to pass down as honor. In our family, love was rarely spoken. It showed up as responsibility, as duty, as silence. Frank believed in structure. Jason believed in himself. Margaret believed in keeping the peace even when the peace was paper thin. No one believed in me. Not really. They believed in what I could do, what I could fix, what I could carry without complaint. That was their version of love, conditional, transactional, quiet. I used to tell myself we were close, that all families had cracked, that mine just hid them better. But the truth was simpler. They didn't love me. They loved my usefulness. When I stopped being useful on their terms, they cut me off. One message. 18 words, and a door that had always been cracked closed quietly finally. But here's what they never saw. I didn't fall apart. I didn't chase after them. I didn't beg to be let back in. Because that door was never open for me in the first place. And now that I'm outside of it, I can see it clearly, not as rejection, but release. They didn't lose me when I left. They lost me long before that, every time I was invisible at their table. Now I don't need a seat. I built my own. They still held the reunion. Same date, same restaurant, same private room with the fireplace and too many ceiling fans. There was an empty chair waiting for me, as if absence could be undone with seating arrangements. I arrived late, 15 minutes on purpose, not to make a statement, just to make a choice. Frank sat at the head of the table. Margaret beside him, eyes lowered. Jason scrolled his phone, looking bored, like the collapse of our family was a minor inconvenience. No laughter, no cake. Just silence that didn't know what to do with itself. Jason stood. Thanks for coming. I pulled out the chair slowly. I didn't come for you. I sat. Straight. Still. Frank leaned forward. You've made your point. Loud and clear. I looked at him. Level, unshaken. No, I said. The bank made the point. I just stopped protecting your lie. He didn't speak. Margaret glanced at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't remember how. Jason leaned back, arms crossed. This is beneath you. No, I said. This is exactly who I am now. They had summoned me like a problem to solve, but I wasn't a problem anymore. I was the consequence they never imagined would sit across from them without apology. Frank's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed level. We're trying to fix this. You walking away, it's not helping. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. You're not trying to fix anything, I said. You're trying to survive what you created. Jason leaned forward, his tone sharp. You're punishing the whole family because you didn't get your way. I looked at him, not angry, just tired. You gave me a job, I said. Not a voice, not a vote, not a seat that mattered. The room went still. Even the ceiling fans seemed to pause. Margaret finally spoke, her voice soft as if hoping it wouldn't land too hard. What do you want, Evelyn? That was the question, wasn't it? Not revenge, not apologies, not fake reconciliation for show. What I wanted was something simple and long overdue. I reached into my bag, placed another envelope on the table. Neat, sealed. This is a formal statement confirming my withdrawal from all remaining business interests. The board, the loan, the name, everything. Frank opened his mouth. I raised a hand. Firm, clear. I'm not finished. For the first time, they listened, not because they wanted to, but because they finally had no choice. I looked at each of them, one by one. No rush, no fear. I'm also submitting an anonymous report to the state auditor, I said. There are discrepancies, missing funds, unpaid vendors, altered payroll records. Jason's jaw tightened. Frank's eyes didn't move. Margaret looked away. I slid the envelope forward. No drama, just facts. This isn't retaliation. It's responsibility. Mine ends here. Yours begins now. Jason's voice cracked. You're destroying us over a few mistakes. I stood up slowly. Not to leave, just to reclaim the air around me. I'm not destroying anything I said. I'm just refusing to protect what was never honest to begin with. Frank leaned forward, desperate now. You think this makes you strong? I looked at him, not with anger, with clarity. No, I said. This makes me done. The table was quiet, like the weight of truth had finally settled in the middle of it. I didn't ask for understanding, didn't expect forgiveness. I wasn't there for closure, I already had it. I was there to deliver what they never saw coming, the clean ending they believed I'd never be brave enough to give. And now it was theirs to sit with. No one spoke. Not Frank, not Jason, not Margaret. The room, once full of plans, of rules, of expectations, had nothing left to hold on to. I didn't fill the silence, didn't soften it. I let it stretch, let it settle over them like a truth they couldn't dodge. Jason's face turned red, his hands clenched. You're walking away from everything we built. I shook my head. You built it on me, not with me. That's the difference. Margaret finally whispered, We're still family. And for a moment I almost believed her. Almost. But family isn't built on silence, on convenience, on invisible labor. Family shows up, listens, shares the weight. They didn't. I looked at her gently. You had years to treat me like family. You chose not to. Frank stood. A last attempt at control. You think walking away makes you better than us? No, I said. It just makes me free. And with that, I stepped back. Not out of fear, but out of reach. There was nothing left to prove. No role left to play. No version of me left that needed their approval. I didn't slam the door. Didn't even look back. I left them with the only thing they ever gave me freely, silence. Outside, the air felt different. Cool, clean, like something had been lifted from my chest, not all at once, but enough to breathe again. I didn't cry, didn't smile. I just walked, each step further from the version of me they had spent years shaping. The loyal daughter, the fixer, the quiet one who never asked for anything. That version stayed at the table next to the lies they still clung to. What I carried out with me was mine entirely. Not a title, not a balance sheet, not their approval, just peace. And peace, I've learned, isn't loud. It doesn't demand to be noticed. It just waits until you're ready to stop carrying what was never yours to hold. They will say, I walked away from my family, but the truth is, I walked toward myself. After a lifetime of bending to their vision, I finally chose to see my own, not out of pride, not out of revenge, but because survival isn't the same as living. And I was done surviving rooms that shrank me. The woman who left that reunion wasn't cold, wasn't angry. She was clear, unapologetically. And that more than anything was the freedom they never expected me to take. I went home to a space that didn't echo with their voices. No footsteps down the hallway, no late night emails, no unspoken rules, just soft light, stillness. A cup of tea I didn't have to rush through. For the first time, my life felt like mine, not something I borrowed or owed. The next morning, I opened my laptop, not to save a sinking business, not to fix someone else's mess, but to start a new client file. A woman starting over after 20 years in a marriage that taught her to stay small. She didn't need a rescue. She needed a mirror. Someone to say, you're not broken. You were just made to forget your own strength. We spoke for an hour. She cried once, then breathed. I knew that breath. It was the same one I took when I finally stopped choosing them over myself. I didn't tell her my story. I didn't need to. Sometimes the work we do isn't about explaining, it's about standing still so someone else can see what's possible. When the call ended, I sat for a moment. No noise, no pressure, just the quiet hum of a life built on choice. Mine. And every part of it earned, honest, enough. I used to think peace would come from being accepted, from finally hearing you matter. We see you. But peace didn't come from them. It never could. It came from walking away before I forgot myself completely. Now it shows up in small ways. Morning light through my window, the sound of the kettle warming, emails I don't dread opening, my calendar no longer belongs to crisis, to deadlines that aren't mine, to people who only called when something was on fire. Sometimes I still feel the old reflex to over-apologize, to fix, to shrink. But then I remember I left. And nothing broke inside me. I was never fragile, just overused. The difference now is that no one gets to decide what I carry. Not Frank, not Jason, not Margaret, not anyone. They're still tangled in a world where power means control, where love looks like silence. But I've stepped out of that frame. I've learned that peace doesn't need to be granted. It can be claimed. One boundary at a time, one truth at a time, one day at a time. And now when I sit in the quiet, it doesn't ask me to vanish. It invites me to exist. Fully, finally. They never responded to the report. No threats, no lawsuits, no apologies, just silence. Not the kind I used to carry, the kind that cornered me, kept me small. This silence was different. It didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to them, to their choices, to their legacy, to the walls they built without realizing I was one of them. The business began to fade. Vendors moved on. Employees quietly left. A cousin emailed me once just to say, "It's different now. It feels empty." I didn't reply, because I wasn't going back, not to explain, not to mend, not to save what refused to save me. They had a chance, so many chances, but they only listened when the silence turned into loss. When the backbone they ignored stepped away without noise, without blame. That absence mine was what finally made them look. And even then, they didn't reach out with anything real. Just fragments, rumors, attempts to rewrite the ending on their terms. But I had already written it, quietly, deliberately. And nothing they said could unwrite the truth they taught me, that sometimes you have to disappear before people realize you were holding up everything. 3 months passed. Then came the envelope. Plain, no logo except for the bank's printed faintly in the corner. No name on the return, just a tracking number and a thin weight that said everything before I even opened it. Inside was a single page. This letter confirms that the commercial loan associated with Evelyn Grace has been formally withdrawn and restructured. No further obligation remains, no action required. No thank you, no apology, no attempt at grace, just ink and law and truth. I held it in my hands for a long time, not because I needed to process it, I already had, but because this quiet, this official, this clean confirmation was the end they thought I'd never reach. They thought I'd come back, that I'd fix it one last time, that guilt would keep me loyal. But guilt only works when you still need their approval, and I didn't. I placed the letter in the folder marked complete, closed the drawer, turned off the light. And that was it. Not a victory parade, not a speech, just peace, earned and documented. The chapter didn't slam shut. It didn't need to. It simply stopped opening when I walked away for the last time. That night, I lit a candle by the window. Not for memory, not for mourning, just to mark the space I had claimed back. The loft was quiet, but not empty. The city moved below, unaware, unbothered, alive in its own rhythm. I poured a glass of wine, opened my notebook, not to document pain, but to begin again. I wrote one line at the top, "You're not difficult, you're just finally visible." That was never about just me. It was for every woman who stayed too long in rooms that never heard her. Every daughter who gave too much in the name of love. Every quiet one who thought endurance was the price of belonging. I thought my story was about business, about betrayal, about family, but really it was about returning to myself piece by piece, truth by truth. They wrote me out long before I walked away. All I did was stop pretending I was still in the script. Now my life is written in my own hand. No co-signers, no shadows, no conditions. The phone stays silent, but not because I'm forgotten, Because I am no longer the one they remember only when things fall apart. I am the one who chose peace. And this is the life I saved for myself. If this story echoed something in you, a moment, a memory, a quiet kind of strength, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you want more stories like this of healing truth and starting over, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. And maybe one of them will sound a little like yours.